That was
in
my opinion. Okay, we're on. So yeah, we're the best parents in the world, obviously, with 0 kids. But we've coached hundreds of kids, hundreds, at this point, right? Because you were coaching back.
Oh yeah. I mean, I coached for 8 years of teams. The last 3 years, it was a high school and a middle school team, and then I ran QB camps throughout. So I had all kinds of pupils that weren't on my teams that I coached. So a lot of kids, great kids. So some of the things that when I think about doing the podcast and the things that we want to talk about, I really think about the things that I would want to say to some of these guys, which I do. I still talk to them and I'm in touch with them and I have great conversations with them. But a lot of it is like, okay, what can I put out there for those guys that are, let's say, in their early 20s or whatever? Some of them are in their 30s now. Some of the kids I coached are 30 years old, married, kids, house, which is insane to me. But so I think about a lot of those guys, and my favorite. So when you're parenting, let's say parenting, you're supposed to teach, encourage, criticize honestly, and redirect. That's like the way to do it. So that's not what I received. I received no teaching, no encouragement, and then harsh criticism for the littlest failure, which was beneficial to me in the sense that no one can really hurt my feelings, right? Because when your mom and dad are regularly making everything harder and worse for you, really, they were probably doing it on purpose, really, the whole time of like, we need to make this guy into a monster. Right. Whether they knew that totally or not, that was kind of what it was. And also, what I learned probably about myself is, this is the way it was when I was little. I was yelling at my parents that I'm the best, and they were yelling at me that you aren't shit. And it was that contrarianism that I grew up in. So I almost need it, actually. When I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do something great, and I'm striving, and I'm like, yeah, I can do it. I'm good enough. I'm capable. I'm better than everyone. I almost need some people that are like, you aren't shit. Like, you're a joke. You're gonna fail. You're a loser. Like, we're embarrassed of you. Like, I almost need that heat and that negativity because I don't really know. I'm not great at doing it without that pushback, because I had that. That was the way that it was. I was like 5 years old, like, I'm rich and I don't have a boss, and like, don't tell me what to do. I'm smarter than everyone else.
Wow.
And they were like, who do you think you are? Did like a bird drop you off from the step? Like, you're not our child. Like, you are not shit. Like, you're lucky if you even have a job to work all day, every day, like we do. Like, that was their way, and that was their reality, really. They were speaking with the truth of their reality, which was not a very pleasant upbringing because of their parents either dying or splitting up and leaving, and then them full-time workers as like teenagers, and like lucky that they had a job to go to that paid a reasonable amount of money. So I'm their kid, so they're like, yeah, you're us, you're one of us. They're super young, and they're thinking like, you would be lucky to even have anything, because they were used to not having anything and then having it very hard. I mean, my dad even told me, like, not even joking, he's like, I want your life to suck like mine did. And it's hilarious, but he wasn't smiling. Like, right. He would, and they probably don't even know all the things that they said because they were so nervous and angry and young. But like, terrible, comments, never encouraging, always like, kind of negative, which is, in the Northeast, that's typical the way that it is.
Yeah.
And, but the successful part of it was the two things. One is you can't really hurt my feelings too much because like, you just can't.
Right.
So that's one good thing. And then the other thing is when you are successful, a lot of people will say negative shit, right?
Yeah.
And they'll try to knock you down.
Yeah.
So like, I actually feel like I thrive to some degree in that space of being told like you can't, because I was like, no, I can. And I think people who meet me a lot of the time would think that I was like very like a prince and encouraged a lot because I have confidence.
Yeah.
And it was like
the opposite.
Complete opposite. I was like, no, I am the best. And they were like, you aren't shit. You must not even be our kid if you think that you're anything special.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll be the boss. I'll have all the money.
Yeah.
Nobody tells me when to go anywhere. Like as like a, 5 or 8-year-old.
Yeah,
And,
that's fascinating because it resonated with me that it's the same with me. Like that's why I'm like, I thrive in these contrarian environments. Like, oh, contrarianism, that's me. I don't know why, but that's me. It's like, I need that negative like feedback
yeah.
to make me know I'm on the right path.
It's like you have to swim upstream. Like you can't go with the flow. You must swim upstream.
Literally looking for it. Literally like
Yeah.
trying to get people pissed.
And then in the times when all of a sudden things are going great, that's part of why I rush to start something new and I go back to the bottom is I get to the mountaintop or whatever.
It's uncomfortable up
and it's
there.
like, what is going on? It's like now no one can even say you suck because you did all this stuff you said and you
Yeah.
proved it. And now I'm in this no man's land where I feel like my feet aren't touching the ground and I'm in a rush to get back to the bottom of a mountain so that I can be climbing again,
Yeah.
as opposed to like enjoying the fruits of the labor or just pushing up further as opposed to like rushing back down in order to go up again. But yeah, that's part of me being very uncomfortable in the times when I've had a lot of money or in the times that things have been just going too great, where I'm like, oh, this doesn't jive with my, who I was when I was little, so it just doesn't make sense for me. So I need to go out and face another adversary, and it's stupid because you can push higher in where you are. Like
Right.
you can recognize that if, okay, I'm not in survival mode anymore, but there's still a lot to go. Where I'm like, no, let me get back to like, I'm bleeding and I'm like at the bottom. Like I have to be back in pure hell in order to like be fighting back up. And, I think that's all part of that same early dynamic that I had with how I was raised. And so when I teach other kids, I don't want them, some kids need the edge, right? So some kids you're gonna be pushing some
Yeah.
buttons on, but I want it to be teach, encourage, build confidence, teach, encourage, build confidence, critique honestly, redirect if necessary. Like, okay, you're doing this and this isn't right. You need to be trying this instead. That's helpful. But I don't know how many kids there are like me where it's like the beating them down is gonna like cause that reaction. I feel like the confidence building is more important and it's better and it's gonna have a better outcome at the end of the end.
Yeah.
And I remember in a middle school game, we were playing in a playoff game against a team that had already beat us pretty handedly. And I just remember telling the kids, I don't care what happens after this game, because there was like a championship game against a really good team. We are winning this game, and that's it.
Yeah.
And like the response that they had of confidence, like immediately was unbelievable, because a young person, 12, 13, or throughout their teen years, the positive change that you can make on them by building their confidence and their psychological state that they're performing in, it's insane the difference that you can make. And
Right.
that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, that's it's so when you're able to help change the mindset of a young person, and they're very easy to kind of help in that regard. They're ready. They want a different change of mindset. It's like they'll start winning. We did that. We actually did that. And at a school we won't name, but the program turned around pretty quickly at that place. All your stuff always like clicks buttons and resonates with me, and I think we had similar upbringings. It's also like your parents did the best they could with whatever resources they had, and like, so even I'm thinking about my upbringing and how it was like this very similar kind of like this relentless knocking down, not just from. It wasn't just from my dad, it was also, my mom was born in Japan, and so she came with all this like guilt and shame, cultural guilt, of just because she was breathing air, like it was like not fair that she should be taking up anyone's space at all. Yeah. So it's just, without even, my mother's amazing, like we have the best relationship, but without even doing or saying anything wrong, it's just kind of put in me this feeling of guilt and shame just for being alive, just for breathing air.
How dare you?
Yeah, how dare you breathe air? So anything at all that would take me out of the just shame mindset was like, oh, you're getting too big for your britches somehow, even though it didn't even have to be verbalized. Like, they would pay lip service to the idea, you can be whatever you want to be, right?
Oh,
like, they
yeah.
knew the right thing to say, but
They're as
like,
empty as can be, those statements.
yeah, but they didn't believe it about themselves, so it's impossible for you. You're just observing as a child, and it's impossible for you to believe. And that's the difference between like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's just like, it's not even tactics, it's just a way. It's just a way of being that like rich kids expect to be rich, and poor kids expect to be poor. And even if you have an incredible will and you're like, I always had this connection, I realized, to spirit and God, and I know how to identify that, but that was the knowing that I was going to be okay.
Yeah, same.
And that was what got me through the entire time. So yeah, that's what got me through the entire time without even knowing that's what it was. But it's like, you can be whatever you want to be. Meanwhile, you live in a house that your friend built, and there's no. It's like you do well for your worst place in the world where you grew up, and your friends live in trailer parks. You don't, and so therefore wow. That is also, you should feel guilty about that also, that these people have it so bad, and this kid gets the crap beaten out of him by his dad every day, so you are blessed and lucky, and that's your standard, right? And so they're doing the best. They did an incredible job, and then you also need to think about how they got it, like how they got it from their parents, and it must have been 10 times worse for them too. So we're all progressing. What we want to do is we just want to kind of like break that whole thing up right now, break all those generational curses up right now. And with a lot of the kids we get to coach, we actually get to help them do that for themselves, where their parents aren't really equipped to do that. And I think that's why we're doing this podcast, and that's why we love coaching so much. And we're kind of like coaching here too. This is like a coaching.
And it's a lot easier for a kid to listen to a coach than to their parents. It's just too loaded with what you have going on with your parents. Your coach, the relationship is more specific, and they don't have this extra interest in you. Like, the interest is specific. It's like, I'm going to get you better, and we're going to win together, and we're going to go our separate ways. So it isn't like I need to like manipulate your life because you're an attachment of me, an extension of me. So it's more of a friendship out of family, out of household. Like, it's more of an enjoyable, shorter, more brief interaction. And you expect that someone who's not your family can probably give you maybe more honest feedback than what you're used to getting. So there's just a lot of benefits to that coach-player type of situation. I remember one kid who was a young player on one of the teams I coached, and he was an extraordinarily good player. He was very good. He just couldn't catch. And it's not that he couldn't, he was just struggling with it. And then the kids on the team started to make fun of him as somebody who couldn't catch. And I knew he was young enough that I was going to stop this issue from being a thing, because he was so already good at the sport and so athletic that it didn't make any real sense for him to have this one hiccup in his game. And I knew that these other guys would enforce it on him by making fun of him for not being able to do it. So I just pulled him aside, and I was like, no. And I told him very clearly, I said, are you a good player, a good football player? And he was like, yeah. I was like, you're really fast, and you can really help the team win and stuff like that. He was like, yeah. So he had a lot of success, so he had some confidence. And I was like, okay, if you're a good athlete and you're a good football player, you can catch. Basically, there isn't any way that you can't catch. Right. So I just taught him how. Right? I just showed him, because it's not just like, oh, put your hands on the ball. No. You use all 10 fingertips, and you use both eyes, and that way you have 12 things on the ball instead of 2. And your eyes have to watch it all the way in. And that was the thing, is he wouldn't watch the ball all the way in, so that's why he wouldn't catch it. So within a few minutes, he goes from no confidence in doing this and having a lot of trouble to pretty decent confidence, and I threw the ball to him 100 times and he caught it 100 times. So feeling like the reinforcement's there. Now he goes back out there and he doesn't catch every single pass, but maybe he catches 8 out of 10 instead of 2 out of 10. And now the rest of his trajectory from that point on is better because I saw it happening. Like, his confidence was going to be lost in this specific thing. He didn't know how to do it. He was being made fun of. I convinced him, there's no way that you're not going to be able to do this. I taught him how to do it, let him have some success with it, encouraged him, sent him back out there, and like instantly way better. And he started saying, I can catch, like all of a sudden.
Yes.
And, like those kind of things are the best thing in the world. And like, those are, for me, that was coaching, that was the best. That was like the best thing you can do was come into those kind of situations where it was a confidence, a little teaching, a little encouragement, a little confidence, instill that and see an unbelievable effect almost immediately.
That's brilliant. That's the whole point. That's like what lights us up. That is a universal lesson. Like, that's, if you could even put that in a reel, because it's universal what happened there. It was first the dynamic he had with you. He looked to you as a father figure right away. In his mind, what he said was, I don't believe I can catch, but if he tells me what to do, I believe I can change. And that's where it starts. And so whatever the technique you taught him, it wasn't just that. It was partly that. It was this man who I respect as a father figure is telling me the truth. And if he's telling me that if I do X, Y, and Z, I will be able to catch, then I'll be able to catch. Then you have to reinforce it. You have to reinforce it. This is like the New Testament is just Jesus going around healing people, but he asks them always, do you believe? Do you believe? Believe and then you are healed. Pick up your mat and walk. It's like, if you don't believe in him, or you don't believe in the father figure, then you're DOA. You're DOA. But that started with his little belief that if Coach Anthony tells me this, it is true. And that's the great thing about working with young people, is they're not jaded. They are reaching out for a father figure, because it doesn't matter how good their father is, but a lot of the times in these programs, father's not even around, right? And so it's like they are dying for somebody in authority, a man, to tell them what to do, to give them a boundary, to tell them the truth. And that's what you did, and that changed that kid's life. And our hope is that in all the programs we've been involved in, and I think so because I'm still tight with these guys from where we coached. Yeah. I know you're still tight with those guys. They're some of our biggest fans. And so we just want to keep doing that, and not just with young people. It's actually, the only reason it's way easier with young people is they don't have so much experience reinforcing bad thinking, bad patterns.
Everything is still open. Whether the life is going to be good or bad is still to be determined. And then what happens is people get older, there's too much bad happens, and then they think, well, okay, my life is bad. And it could only be bad because so many bad things happen.
They don't believe.
Yeah, but early on, it's like, well, things could go great or they can go terrible. I have no idea what's going to happen. And then when the challenges come, people are like, oh, only bad stuff happens, which is really not true, but that's how the brain starts to work, is only recognizing the bad, which is why you have to actually tell yourself that. You have to be like, all right, when I'm harping on the few failures that I've had and going over them again and again, just recognize, okay, my brain's only job is to notice the failures. It only has one job. So really what's happening in reality is I'm focusing on the 10%. The 90% is not just good, a lot of it's great. A lot of it is fantastic, the 90%. But my brain's only job is to focus on the negative, therefore I repeatedly focus on the 10 bad percent. And I think because I'm an intelligent person that this is why I need to like wallow in this crap because I have an overactive brain. It's like, no, yeah, the intelligence is great if you're using it, if it's not using you, if you're directing your thought process onto building instead of just burning yourself down. And then just taking that step back, realizing my brain's only job is to see the negative, 90% of everything is fantastic, and stop being sad about nonsense, which that goes back to me not being able to sleep at night over a pass, and all that. And then the conversation we had the other day about people and about coaching and about the fact that all of a sudden it's in vogue to be dealing with your trauma. And that I think that is a place that losers want to hang out for way too long, where we have these traumatic events and issues that we've worked to get through, but there has to be the other side. Like the fact that like you're a negative person and you're a loser and you're always in a bad mood and you're saying like, well, I went to a therapist or I'm working on it or I'm recognizing my trauma. Okay, great. Give yourself like a 3-year, maybe a 5-year even window of like a few different kinds of therapies, having conversations with some of the people in your family or whatever that you need to have. And then like have there be a point where it's like, well, yeah, I recognize that there was an issue. I did certain work to solve it. And then I came out the other side and I'm not still just lingering. Like, is there a percentage of you that's always going to remember those things that you have to kind of keep in mind? All right, yeah, 5% of me is I have to knock down the negative thoughts from just keep recurring because they'll be there lingering if I'm not actively pushing them down. But I think that there's people already who have been like very comfortable sitting in this, I'm working on myself, I'm dealing with my trauma space, and they don't have, there isn't any other side. It's really, in 10 years from now and in 20 years from now, they're gonna have the same story about how they went through something and they're dealing with it. And I think that is just another hideout, comfortable, loser.
Looping.
Yeah, it's okay to not really deal with it.
You're just talking about dealing with it. The therapy I did, the EMDR therapy, it took 12 weeks. So I wouldn't even give yourself a year. It's like, and it's not like, oh, 12 weeks I'm better, right? It's like, but 12 weeks you're 80% better, and that's enough just to start hitting the road and getting on with your life and start moving from a new place. And so maybe after that therapy you need just some integration, right? You need some like how am I going to live my life now? That takes a little bit of time, but just start moving forward. Like Don Draper said, Mad Men, just forget about it and move forward. Or deal with it and move forward is what we're saying. But deal with it. Like definitely deal with it, but don't loop on it, because all you're doing is and that's like the big hang up that I had about therapy before I actually got what I think is real therapy is the looping. Like it just seemed like, the only therapy I ever saw was like Tony Soprano, and it's just like, he's just telling that same story over and over again. And then my friends in therapy, they're just telling the same story they've been telling for the past 7 years. It's like, is that helping? Or you're just stuck in that, and it's like, I think you're stuck in it. Pretty sure you're stuck in it.
You're just paying someone to listen to your stupid story because everyone else won't answer the phone anymore
right,
to hear
you're
your
sick
stupid
of hearing the story again.
So now you pay $150 an hour every week so that you can tell the same exact story about like the 1 or 2 unfortunate events that happen to you. And the funny thing about that is the people who had the worst stuff you ever heard happen, they're never the negative people.
No.
The people who had stuff happen where you're like, oh my God, that's the worst thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
They're like happy, positive, optimistic, a pleasure to be around. And it's like the people that had like, they thought their life was supposed to be great and there was like 2 really unfortunate events that happened that totally bashed that story that they thought about themselves. Yeah. And they're just like reeling for the rest of their life about the lack of perfection that exists in their life. And there's so many of those people. There's so much of that. I can't friggin' stand it. And a lot of it also is that people don't actually get out there and mix it up with other people that much. So there's not a lot of perspective. There's a lot of like, well, I only know these 20 people, and out of them, I don't have it that great, so I'm going to be miserable. When it's like, if you just left the 20 people that you see all the time, like you're going to the jail to volunteer, right? You're
Yeah.
going tomorrow to
Yeah.
the jail of other. Like, you're going to be there and be like, oh my God, like, my life
Tonight
is.
I'm going, actually.
Oh,
but
it's tonight.
Yeah, so,
You're-
yeah.
The
yeah.
perspective on being around other people that actually have had something bad happen is like
Yeah,
amazing.
it's like another great thing about Miami is that like you date these girls who are like from like South America or they're from like Africa, and like they talk about their childhood like, oh yeah, it was like a civil war, both my parents were killed. it's like I was orphaned, I was put into the slave trade, and then they're like, and they're here and they're not in therapy.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, and I love America, and America's the best place in the world. You can do
Yeah.
whatever you want here, and they're the happiest people in the world.
Yeah, I'm happy to be alive. I never go a day without eating food.
Yeah. And it's just like the kid that grew up in Hollywood, like in a perfect house and perfect everything, is mad because he saw his mom doing drugs or something, and like it ruined his life forever. And it's silly, but it's like, deal with it. I mean, I get it. I also get that like you only have your context as a child, so like the feelings are legitimate. The things that like scared you and traumatized you as a child, doesn't matter what in a relative sense your upbringing was like, but deal with it. Deal with it and don't dwell on it.
Yeah.
Don't hide out there.
And I think the best thing that, well, I don't know if it's the best thing, but I just want to tell you, if you're one of these people, that you are the majority. You're not like the people that like had a pretty damn good life overall and just had like one or two or even three very sad, unfortunate events with a family member or a significant other, and you're just like pretending that you have a license to be negative forever because of it. You are the majority. You are not, because I think a lot of people think that they like have like this specific thing. It's like, I actually mix it up with a lot of people. I have rich and poor friends. I've moved around. Like, I interact with a lot of people with different socioeconomic backgrounds and all kinds of different backgrounds. And so when I talk to certain people that'll be like really down on themselves about the same thing over and over again, it's like, dude, if you could just meet a few other people who aren't the same handful of people that you've talked to every day for however many years, you would be like, oh, that's actually bad. My life is actually really good, and I'm just one of these idiots in the empire that is upset that things weren't perfect. And I've wallowed about, I got mad because I wasn't the professional football player. I was upset because I failed at my dream that only 32 people on friggin' Earth achieve. And like, I let that be like a thing. Like, oh geez, I put all this time and effort in and then I just wasn't quite good enough to become a pro football player. And like, get over that, spend whatever period of time you have to bury it, and then realize, okay, it's absurd. It's great that you had the dream and that you actually were somewhat in the market of getting it, and then realize that you are not that, and let it go, and get on to the next thing. And if you think that you have it bad, you probably just don't spend time around anyone who has ever had it bad.
Yeah, it's like, you're not unique at all. It's 4 traumas. It's like abuse, sexual, I'm not minimizing it, but there's 4. And it's like, you either have one of these things, abuse, sexual or physical, there's abandonment and neglect, rejection from society, and there's like one more. I named them all, basically. I just named them all, or maybe I'm missing one, but that's it. You're in one of those categories.
Or some combination of
all of them, and that's it. You're not unique. It's all the same. It's very easily dealt with. It's very, very easily dealt with because there are therapists who actually they're paid for the result, not for keeping you on the couch. And like, they've just done it with the same traumas 1,000 times, 10,000 times. If you actually want to deal with it, I have a great therapist. Anthony has some great therapists. There's also some great practices you can do. But the point is, deal with it, get on with it.
Get on with it. We'll go next segment.
Next segment. Yeah. Wrap that.
That'll probably be it, because that was another 30.